The rain in Boston fell in sheets, drumming against the hood of Barbara Taylor's weathered umbrella. She checked her watch again. 7:45 p.m. She'd been standing outside South Station for over an hour, her beige trench coat now dark with moisture around the shoulders and hem. "He's not coming," she muttered to herself, shifting her weight from one aching foot to the other. At 62, Barbara wasn't as resilient to these long waits as she once had been. Her knees protested, and a familiar tension headache began to throb at her temples. She pulled out her phone and checked it again. No messages, no missed calls. The screen showed her last text to her son Tyler, sent 3 hours ago. "Train arrives 6:30. See you soon. Love, Mom." Inside the station, travelers hurried past with rolling suitcases and focused expressions. Families reunited with embraces. Lovers found each other in the crowd. But Barbara stood alone, her small weekend bag at her feet, growing damper by the minute. She dialed Tyler's number for the 5th time. It rang until voicemail picked up. "Tyler, it's Mom again. I'm still at the station. Please call me back." Her voice remained steady, but her grip on the phone tightened. A young woman under a bright yellow umbrella gave Barbara a sympathetic glance as she passed. "Do you need help, Mom? Can I call someone for you?" Barbara forced a smile. "No, thank you. My son is just running late." The lie fell easily from her lips, a mother's instinct to protect her child's reputation, even when he wasn't there to appreciate it. She decided to give him 15 more minutes before calling a rideshare. This wasn't the first time Tyler had forgotten about her, but something about standing in the cold rain, watching other families reunite, struck a deeper chord of disappointment than usual. Barbara thought back to the reason for her visit, Tyler's 35th birthday tomorrow. In her bag was a hand-knit sweater she'd spent months working on, choosing a deep blue yarn that would bring out his eyes. Next to it was an envelope containing the title to her late husband's 1967 Mustang, the car Tyler had learned to drive in, the car he'd borrowed countless times in high school and college, the car she'd promised would one day be his. Her phone buzzed, and her heart leapt, but it was just a news alert. She put the phone away and picked up her bag. Inside a nearby coffee shop, Barbara ordered a hot tea and settled at a window table where she could still watch for Tyler. She removed her damp coat and draped it over an empty chair, then pulled out her phone to order a rideshare. Just as she was confirming her ride, a text came through. "Tyler, oh shit, Mum forgot you were coming today. At Keegan's bachelor party in Providence. Can you grab an Uber? Key under mat. Sorry." No mention of picking her up. No offer to leave the party. Not even a phone call. Barbara stared at the message, feeling something inside her finally give way. She texted back, "Don't worry about it. Enjoy the party." She cancelled the rideshare to Tyler's condo and instead booked a room at the Marriott 2 blocks away. Then she pulled up the local Craigslist app on her phone and began to compose a new listing, her fingers moving with purpose. For sale, 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback, excellent condition. One owner. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but Barbara no longer felt the chill she had moments before. For the first time in years, she felt a strange, liberating warmth spreading through her chest, the heat of a decision too long delayed. Barbara woke to the muted sounds of city traffic outside her hotel window. For a moment she forgot where she was, expecting to see the familiar floral wallpaper of her bedroom in Lexington. Instead, the neutral tones of the Marriott greeted her, and the events of the previous evening came rushing back. Her phone showed 3 missed calls and 5 texts from Tyler, all received after midnight. She set the phone down without reading them. The digital clock on the nightstand read 7:23 a.m. Barbara had always been an early riser, a habit from decades of teaching high school English before her retirement 2 years ago. She made herself a cup of mediocre hotel room coffee and sat by the window, watching Boston wake up. The rain had stopped, leaving behind puddles that reflected the clear blue morning sky. It was going to be a beautiful day. Barbara opened her laptop and checked her Craigslist posting. 15 inquiries already, despite the late-night listing. The 1967 Mustang Fastback in Highland Green, the same color as the one from Bullet, was a collector's item. Richard, her late husband, had maintained it meticulously for over 40 years. It was his pride and joy, and he had always told Tyler it would be his someday. "Someday when you understand what it means to take care of something special," Richard would say. As Barbara scrolled through the messages, one stood out. A father looking to buy the car for his son's high school graduation. The message was respectful, asking detailed questions about the car's condition and history. The kind of message Richard would have appreciated. Her phone buzzed again. Tyler. This time she answered. "Mom, where are you? I've been calling all night." Tyler's voice was a mixture of concern and irritation. "I got a hotel room," Barbara replied, her voice calm. It seemed easier. "You should have come to the condo. I got home around 2. Barbara took a sip of her coffee. "It was late. I didn't want to disturb you." "Well, I can come get you now. What hotel are you at?" "The Marriott by Copley Square." "I can be there in 30 minutes. Barbara gazed out at the city skyline. "No need to rush. I have some business to take care of this morning. Why don't we meet for lunch instead?" "Business? What business? You're in Boston to see me, right?" The irritation in Tyler's voice was more pronounced now. "I'll explain at lunch. Let's meet at that Italian place you like at noon." After hanging up, Barbara replied to the father interested in the Mustang, arranging to meet him at a coffee shop near her hotel in an hour. She showered, dressed in a simple navy blue dress with a light cardigan, and headed out. The coffee shop was busy with the morning rush, but Barbara spotted him immediately, a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair, wearing a worn Red Sox cap and a button-down shirt. He stood when she approached, extending his hand. "Mrs. Taylor, I'm Jack Hernandez. Thank you for meeting me." They ordered coffee and found a quiet corner table. "So tell me about this car," Jack said, his eyes kind but direct. Barbara found herself sharing more than just the vehicle specifications. She told him about Richard, how he'd bought the car when they were newlyweds, how he'd taught both her and later Tyler to drive in it, how the Mustang had been part of family vacations, road trips, and even brought Tyler home from the hospital when he was born. "My son Miguel is graduating next month," Jack explained. "He's worked 2 jobs all through high school to save for college. Never asked for anything. I want to give him something special, something that—" He paused, searching for words. "Something that shows the value of taking care of things," Barbara finished for him. Jack nodded. "Exactly." She showed him photos of the car on her phone. The gleaming paint, the immaculate interior, the engine compartment clean enough to eat off. "It's beautiful," Jack said, genuine admiration in his voice. "How much are you asking?" Barbara named a figure significantly below market value. Jack looked surprised. "That's very generous, but I know this car is worth more." "It is," Barbara agreed, "but I'm not selling it to just anyone. I want it to go to someone who will appreciate it." They agreed that Jack would transfer the money that afternoon and pick up the car from her garage in Lexington the following weekend. As they shook hands to seal the deal, Barbara felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. "Your son is lucky to have a father like you," she said. Jack smiled. "I'm the lucky one. Kids teach you what matters." As Barbara walked back to her hotel to prepare for lunch with Tyler, she felt an unexpected sense of peace. The Mustang had represented a promise, one that Richard had made to Tyler, and one that she had felt obligated to keep. But promises were meant to be earned, not simply received. At precisely noon, Barbara entered Giacomo's, Tyler's favorite Italian restaurant. He was already there, checking his phone at a corner table. He looked up when she approached, rising to give her a quick hug. "Mom, I'm really sorry about yesterday," he began, the words rushing out. "Keegan's party was last minute, and I completely forgot we had arranged for you to visit. I should have called." Barbara studied her son's face. At 35, Tyler had Richard's strong jawline and her own hazel eyes. He was handsome in his expensive button-down shirt and designer watch, successful in his finance career, living in his luxury condo, always busy with important meetings and social engagements. "It's all right," she said, sitting down. "Things happen." I got you a room key made. You can stay with me tonight. Barbara nodded, accepting the key but knowing she wouldn't use it. Thank you. The waiter came, and they ordered spaghetti carbonara for Tyler, eggplant parmesan for Barbara. When they were alone again, Tyler leaned forward. So what's this business you had to take care of? Barbara took a sip of water, gathering her thoughts. I sold your father's Mustang this morning. Tyler's fork clattered against his plate. You what? You sold Dad's car? Tyler's voice was low but strained, as if he was fighting to keep his composure in the crowded restaurant. Without even telling me? Barbara met her son's incredulous stare with a steady gaze. Yes, I did. But that car was supposed to be mine. Dad always said— I know what your father said, Barbara interrupted, her tone measured. He said the car would be yours someday, when you understood what it meant to take care of something special. Tyler's face flushed. And you decided I don't deserve it, just like that. Barbara carefully folded her napkin and placed it beside her plate. Around them, the restaurant hummed with lunchtime conversations and the clinking of silverware against plates. A waiter passed by with a steaming platter of seafood linguine, the aroma momentarily distracting her. Tyler, when was the last time you came to visit me in Lexington? She asked. The question seemed to throw him off balance. What does that have to do with anything? It's been 8 months, Barbara continued, since Christmas. And even then, you only stayed for dinner before heading to Aspen with your friends. I've been busy with work. The Morgan account has been— You've been busy for years, Tyler. Barbara took a sip of her water. Too busy to return my calls. Too busy to remember I was coming to visit, even though we confirmed the date last week. The waiter arrived with their meals, momentarily halting their conversation. Barbara thanked him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When they were alone again, Tyler leaned forward. So this is punishment? For forgetting to pick you up? Barbara shook her head. No, this is a consequence. A consequence? Tyler's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. He noticed and lowered his voice again. I'm 35 years old, Mom. I'm not a child you can punish for missing curfew. That's exactly my point, Barbara said, taking a small bite of her eggplant parmesan. You're not a child anymore. You're a grown man who left his mother standing in the rain for over an hour because something more entertaining came up. Tyler had the decency to look ashamed for a moment before his indignation returned. I apologized for that. Things happen. But the car, Mom, Dad's car, that's different. Is it? Barbara asked. Your father believed that car represented something. Responsibility, care, attention, the things you give to what you value. Tyler stabbed at his carbonara. So who'd you sell it to? Some collector who's going to lock it away in a garage. A father buying it for his son's high school graduation. A boy who worked 2 jobs throughout high school to save for college. And I bet you didn't even get market value for it, Tyler muttered. Barbara's expression hardened slightly. The price was fair for what I wanted to accomplish. They ate in tense silence for several minutes. Barbara observed her son as he attacked his pasta, his movements sharp and agitated. She remembered him as a little boy, so excited when Richard would take him for rides in the Mustang, his face pressed against the window as they drove through autumn leaves. Where had that boy gone? I brought your birthday present, Barbara said finally, reaching into her purse and pulling out a carefully wrapped package. Tyler looked at it warily, as if it might contain another disappointment. Thanks, he said, setting it aside without opening it. It's a sweater. I knitted it myself. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Tyler's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at Barbara with obvious impatience. I should take this. It's work. On a Saturday? The markets don't care what day it is, Mom. He stood, answering the call as he walked toward the restaurant entrance. Barbara watched him go, noting how easily he slipped into his professional persona, his voice becoming confident and assertive as he discussed whatever financial matter required his attention. She finished her meal slowly, thinking about the house in Lexington that felt too big now that Richard was gone. Their neighbors, the Robertsons, had sold their place last year and moved to a retirement community in Florida. They'd invited her to visit, suggesting she might like it there. Barbara had dismissed the idea at the time, but now she wondered. Tyler returned 15 minutes later, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Sorry about that. Where were we?" "You were about to tell me about your life," Barbara said. "How are things with Melissa?" Tyler's expression clouded. "We broke up 3 months ago." "I didn't know that. I told you when it happened." "No," Barbara said gently. "You didn't." Tyler frowned, then shrugged. "Well, it didn't work out. She wanted more commitment than I could give right now, with the promotion and everything." Barbara nodded, recognizing the pattern. Tyler's relationships typically lasted 6 months to a year before dissolving for similar reasons. Always because of work, never because of any fault of his own. "I'm sorry to hear that. I liked Melissa." "Yeah, well," Tyler signaled for the check. "So, how long are you planning to stay in Boston?" "I'm taking the train back tonight." Tyler looked surprised. "Tonight? But you just got here. I thought we could have dinner tomorrow, maybe catch a Sox game." "I need to get back. I have an appointment on Monday." "An appointment? Is everything okay?" A flicker of genuine concern crossed Tyler's face. "Just a real estate agent. I'm thinking of selling the house." Tyler set down his water glass with more force than necessary. "Selling the house? Where would you go?" "I'm considering that retirement community the Robertsons moved to in Naples, Florida." Tyler looked stunned. "You hate the heat." "I hate the winters more these days. My arthritis gets worse every year." "But all your friends are here. Your book club, your gardening group." "Catherine from my book club moved to Arizona last year. And Jean and Howard are in North Carolina now." Barbara smiled sadly. "People move on, Tyler. That's life." The check arrived, and Tyler quickly handed over his credit card before Barbara could reach for her purse. "At least let me pay for lunch," he said. "Thank you." When the waiter had gone, Tyler leaned forward, his expression serious. "Look, Mom, I know I've been busy lately, and I'm sorry about yesterday, really, but selling Dad's car and now the house, these are big decisions. Don't you think we should discuss them first?" "Why?" Barbara asked simply. The question seemed to catch Tyler off guard. Because they affect both of us. The house is my childhood home, and the car—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "The car was supposed to be mine. The house is mine, Tyler. I've lived there for 40 years. I raised you there. I took care of your father there until he died. And yes, it holds memories for you, but you visit twice a year at most. That's not fair." "No, it's not fair," Barbara agreed. "It's not fair that I rattle around in that big house alone while you build your life here without making space for me in it. It's not fair that I kept that car pristine for 5 years after your father died, waiting for you to show enough interest to deserve it." Tyler's expression hardened. "So this is about punishing me for not visiting enough? This is about me finally making decisions for myself instead of preserving things for a son who doesn't seem to care." The waiter returned with Tyler's card and receipt. They sat in silence as Tyler signed it, his movements sharp with anger. As they stood to leave, Barbara touched her son's arm. "I love you, Tyler. That hasn't changed. But I won't put my life on hold anymore waiting for you to remember I exist." Outside the restaurant, the afternoon sun was bright, the sidewalks busy with weekend shoppers and tourists. Tyler checked his watch. "I should get back to the office for a few hours. There's a merger we're working on." Barbara nodded, unsurprised. "Of course. But I can pick you up from your hotel later. We could have dinner. I think I'll explore the city a bit before my train. It's been a while since I've had time to myself in Boston." Tyler frowned, clearly unsure how to respond to this new, independent version of his mother. Finally, he leaned in to give her a stiff hug. "Call me before you leave?" "I will," Barbara promised, though they both knew the conversation would be brief and perfunctory. As Tyler walked away, his phone already back in his hand, Barbara watched him disappear into the crowd. The hand-knit sweater remained unopened on the restaurant table behind them, forgotten in the wake of their confrontation. Barbara wandered through the Boston Public Garden, finding solace in the meticulously maintained flower beds and the gentle ripple of the lagoon. Swan boats glided across the water, filled with tourists enjoying the perfect June weather. She settled on a bench beneath a flowering dogwood tree, watching a young father teaching his daughter how to feed the ducks without crowding them. "Not too close, Sophie," he cautioned gently. "Remember, we're in their home." The little girl, no more than 4, nodded solemnly before tossing another piece of bread with exaggerated care. Her delighted giggle when a mallard snatched it up echoed across the water. Barbara smiled, remembering similar afternoons with Tyler decades ago. He had been an adventurous child, always climbing too high, running too fast, eager to explore every corner of their world. Richard had encouraged his curiosity while she had worried about scraped knees and broken bones. Between them, they'd balanced each other out. Her phone buzzed in her purse. Expecting Tyler, she was surprised to see Jack Hernandez's name on the screen. "Hello, Mrs. Taylor, it's Jack. I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, and please call me Barbara." "Barbara, then." His voice was warm. "I wanted to let you know the money has been transferred to your account. All 45,000. Thank you, Jack. I also wanted to ask, would it be possible to pick up the car tomorrow instead of next weekend? Miguel's graduation is Friday, and I'd love to surprise him after the ceremony." Barbara considered her empty evening ahead, the train ticket she hadn't yet purchased, the quiet house waiting for her in Lexington. "Actually, I'm heading back to Lexington tonight. You could come by tomorrow morning if that works for you." "That would be perfect, thank you." After arranging the details, Barbara ended the call with a lighter heart than she'd felt since arriving in Boston. The car would go to someone who deserved it, someone who would appreciate it not just for its monetary value, but for what it represented. She thought about the confrontation with Tyler at lunch. His indignation had been predictable, but what surprised her was how little his anger had affected her. In the past, she would have backpedaled, made excuses, perhaps even reversed her decision to keep the peace. Richard had always been the firm one, while she softened his edges. But Richard was gone, and Barbara was tired of softening. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Tyler. "Have a safe trip home. Sorry about lunch. We'll talk soon." No mention of the sweater he'd left behind. No real acknowledgement of their conversation, just a perfunctory message that would let him feel he'd done his duty. Barbara typed back, "Thank you, love you." Because despite everything she did, as the afternoon lengthened into evening, Barbara made her way to South Station, this time entering through the main doors rather than waiting outside. She purchased a ticket for the 7:15 train to Lexington and found a small cafe inside where she could wait. Over a cup of tea and a blueberry scone, she scrolled through real estate listings in Naples, Florida. The Pelican Bay community, where the Robertsons had moved, featured condos with views of the Gulf, walking paths through nature preserves, and a vibrant social calendar for residents. The prices were reasonable, especially if she sold the Lexington house. Property values in her neighborhood had skyrocketed in recent years as young families from Boston sought more space in the suburbs. Barbara had lived in New England her entire life. The thought of leaving was both terrifying and exhilarating. No more brutal winters, no more shoveling snow or worrying about ice dams on the roof, but also no more autumn foliage blazing against clear blue skies, no more first crocuses pushing through the last snow of March. And what about Tyler? Moving to Florida would put even more distance between them, though Barbara wondered if geographic distance mattered when the emotional chasm was already so wide. She remembered the conversation she'd had with Richard in his final weeks, as cancer slowly claimed him. "Promise me you'll live, Barb," he'd said, his voice raspy from the treatments that had failed to save him. "Not just exist, live." "I don't know how to live without you," she'd confessed, holding his thin hand between hers. "You'll figure it out. You're stronger than you think." At the time, she hadn't believed him. The 40 years they'd spent together had shaped her identity around being Richard's wife, Tyler's mother. With Richard gone and Tyler distant, who was she now? The answer had been slow in coming, emerging in small moments of independence over the past 5 years. The first time she'd taken a trip alone, just a weekend in Vermont to see the fall colors, but a step nonetheless. The book club she'd joined, where she'd found her voice in literary discussions. The community college class in watercolor painting she'd taken last spring, discovering a talent she never knew she possessed. Barbara pulled out her tablet and opened the photo gallery. Amid pictures of her garden and neighborhood cats, she found the images of her paintings from the class exhibition. The instructor had encouraged her to continue, suggesting she had a natural eye for composition and color. There was an advanced class starting in the fall, but there would be art classes in Florida too, different landscapes to capture different light. The station announcer called her train, interrupting her thoughts. Barbara gathered her belongings and made her way to the platform, boarding the train that would take her back to Lexington. As the train pulled away from Boston, Barbara felt a curious sense of finality, as if she were leaving more than just the city behind. Perhaps she was leaving behind a version of herself, the accommodating mother who arranged her life around brief visits and forgotten promises. The conductor checked her ticket, smiling as he returned it. "Heading home?" "Yes," Barbara replied, though she wasn't entirely sure what home meant anymore. Back in Lexington, Barbara took a taxi from the station to her house on Maple Street. The porch light was on. She always left it on when traveling, a habit Richard had instilled in her. The house looked the same as always, the white colonial with black shutters, the carefully tended garden beds, the stone path leading to the front door. Yet somehow it felt different now, as if she was seeing it through a stranger's eyes. Inside, she moved through the familiar rooms, turning on lights against the gathering dusk. In the kitchen, she filled the kettle for tea, her evening ritual. While waiting for it to boil, she noticed the blinking light on her answering machine. Few people called her landline anymore, but she kept it for emergencies. She pressed the play button. "Mrs. Taylor, this is Sharon Mitchell from Mitchell Realty, returning your call about possibly listing your property. I'd be happy to come by for an assessment whenever is convenient for you. My cell number is—" Barbara jotted down the number as the kettle whistled. She would call the agent on Monday as planned, but now with more certainty than before. With her tea, she wandered into Richard's study, a room she'd left largely untouched since his death. His books still lined the shelves. His reading glasses still rested on the desk where he'd left them. The leather chair still held the impression of his form after decades of use. On the wall hung framed photographs chronicling their life together. Their wedding day in 1982, a young Tyler on Richard's shoulders at a Red Sox game, the three of them in front of the Grand Canyon, the proud parents at Tyler's college graduation, the story of a family. Barbara set her tea on the desk and moved to the wall safe, hidden behind a landscape painting. Richard had insisted on the safe when they'd renovated the house 20 years ago. "For important papers," he'd said. The combination was their wedding date, 06/12/82. Inside were their marriage certificate, Richard's will, insurance policies, and the deed to the house. Beneath these documents was a small velvet box containing her mother's pearls, which she rarely wore but couldn't bear to part with. And there, in a manila envelope, were the now obsolete papers for the Mustang. Barbara removed the envelope, running her fingers over Richard's neat handwriting on the label, Mustang, 1967. Inside was the original bill of sale, maintenance records meticulously kept over decades, and the owner's manual, worn from use but still intact. She would give these to Jack tomorrow for Miguel. A boy should know the history of such a special gift. Returning to the kitchen, Barbara noticed her answering machine blinking again. A new message had come in while she was in the study. She pressed play. "Mom, it's me." Tyler's voice sounded strained. "I've been thinking about our conversation, about the car and the house and everything. I think we need to talk more about this. Not over the phone. I can come up next weekend if that works for you. Just don't do anything drastic, okay? Call me." Barbara stared at the machine, conflicting emotions washing over her. Part of her, the mother who had always put Tyler first, wanted to call him immediately, to reassure him that nothing would change without his approval. But another part, The woman who had stood in the rain yesterday recognized the familiar pattern, Tyler feeling threatened by her independence, making promises of attention that would evaporate as soon as the crisis passed. She would call him, but not tonight. Tonight, she needed to sit with her decision, to feel its weight and its rightness. To remember that she was not just Tyler's mother, but Barbara Taylor, a woman with her own life to live. Taking her tea to the back porch, Barbara settled into a wicker chair and looked up at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. The same stars would shine over Naples, she thought. Different trees would frame them, different sounds would accompany them, but the stars themselves would be constant. Like love, she reflected. The shape of it might change, but its essence remained. The morning light filtered through the kitchen windows as Barbara prepared coffee, the routine so familiar she could do it with her eyes closed. Outside, dew glistened on her garden, where early summer perennials were beginning to bloom, peonies unfurling their lush petals, irises standing tall among the greenery. She had planted many of these flowers with Richard over the years, each one selected with care and positioned according to his meticulous garden plan. The doorbell rang at precisely 9:30 a.m. Barbara smoothed her cotton blouse and went to answer it, finding Jack Hernandez standing on her porch. He wore the same Red Sox cap as yesterday, paired with a clean white t-shirt and jeans. "Good morning, Barbara," he said, removing his cap. "I hope I'm not too early." "Right on time," she assured him, gesturing him inside. "Would you like some coffee before we go to the garage?" "That would be great, thank you." In the kitchen, Jack admired the collection of hand-painted tiles above the sink, souvenirs from Barbara and Richard's travels over the years. "These are beautiful," he commented, pointing to one depicting a coastal village. "Portugal?" Barbara nodded, surprised. "Yes, a little town called Nazaré. You've been?" "My wife's family is from Lisbon. We try to visit every few years." He accepted the mug she offered. Maria would love these tiles. They chatted easily as they drank their coffee. Jack was a contractor who specialized in historical renovations, which explained his appreciation for craftsmanship. His wife, Maria, taught second grade at a Boston public school. Miguel was their only child, a fact Jack mentioned with a hint of old sadness that Barbara recognized but didn't probe. "He wants to be an engineer," Jack said with obvious pride. "Got a scholarship to Northeastern. Smart kid. Works harder than anyone I know." "He sounds wonderful," Barbara said sincerely. "He is, but enough about my bragging. Tell me about the car's original owner, your husband." Barbara found herself sharing stories about Richard as they finished their coffee. How he'd saved for 3 years to buy the Mustang, how he'd taught automotive classes at the high school while also running the English department, how he'd spent countless weekends under the hood with Tyler when their son was a teenager. "He sounds like a remarkable man," Jack said when she finished. He was. Barbara rose, gathering their empty mugs. "Shall we go see the car?" The detached garage sat at the end of the driveway, a structure Richard had designed himself to house his prized possession. Barbara unlocked the side door, and they stepped into the cool interior. She flipped on the lights, revealing the Mustang in all its glory, the Highland green paint gleaming under the fluorescent bulbs. Jack let out a low whistle. Even more beautiful than the pictures. The car sat on 4 jack stands, the tires removed to prevent flat spots during long-term storage, another of Richard's careful practices. The tires themselves were mounted on a rack against the wall, covered to protect them from light damage. "Richard believed in proper storage," Barbara explained, gesturing to the car cover folded neatly on a shelf. "He put it up on stands every winter, even though he drove it year-round otherwise." Jack circled the vehicle slowly, taking in every detail with a professional eye. "The condition is incredible. Original paint. One respray about 15 years ago, same color. Richard insisted on the best body shop in Massachusetts. They matched the original Ford formula exactly." Barbara watched as Jack crouched to examine the undercarriage, noting with approval his methodical inspection. This was a man who understood what he was looking at, who would appreciate the car properly. "The engine is numbers matching," she continued. 289 cubic inch V8. Richard rebuilt it himself about 25,000 miles ago. Jack straightened up. Mind if I look under the hood? Barbara showed him the hidden hood release, a security feature Richard had installed. Jack spent several minutes examining the engine compartment, occasionally nodding or making appreciative sounds. Your husband was a meticulous man, he said finally, closing the hood with care. Everything's exactly as it should be. Barbara handed him the manila envelope from the safe. Here are all the documents, original bill of sale, maintenance records, owner's manual, everything. Jack leafed through the papers reverently. This is a history book. It is, Barbara agreed. And now you'll add your own chapter. They discussed the logistics of moving the car. Jack would return that afternoon with his brother and a trailer. They would mount the tires, lower the car from the stands, and transport it to Jack's garage in Somerville, where it would stay hidden until Miguel's graduation on Friday. I can't wait to see his face, Jack said, his eyes bright with anticipation. As they walked back to the house, Barbara felt a surprising lightness. The decision that had seemed so momentous yesterday now felt right, natural even. The car was going to a good home, to people who would cherish it as Richard had. Inside, Jack completed the paperwork and handed Barbara a cashier's check for the agreed amount. Are you sure about the price? He asked again. I know this car is worth at least $60,000 in this condition. Barbara shook her head. The price is fair for what I want to accomplish. Jack nodded, understanding. Miguel will know what this car represents. I'll make sure of it. After Jack left, promising to return at 3 with the trailer, Barbara found herself standing in the empty garage. The space seemed larger without the Mustang's presence, the outlines of Richard's tools on their wall-mounted pegboard, the only reminder of the countless hours he'd spent here. She touched the workbench where he'd taught Tyler how to change spark plugs, where they'd rebuilt carburetors together during Tyler's high school years. Those had been good times. Father and son, connected by shared passion, their occasional conflicts forgotten in the joy of mechanical problem-solving. When had Tyler stopped coming to the garage? Barbara couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. College, perhaps, when he'd discovered economics and finance, when the allure of Wall Street had replaced the simple satisfaction of turning a wrench. Or later, when his first bonus had allowed him to buy a brand-new BMW, making his father's vintage Ford seem quaint by comparison. Barbara's phone rang, interrupting her reverie. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. Hello? Mom, you didn't call me back last night. His voice held a note of accusation. I got in late and didn't want to disturb you, Barbara replied, echoing his own excuse from the day before. Did you get my message about coming up next weekend to talk? Barbara leaned against the workbench. I did. That would be nice. Good. Tyler seemed relieved. We can discuss this whole house situation then. I did some research, and there are some great assisted living communities right here in Massachusetts if you're set on downsizing. No need to move all the way to Florida. The familiar pattern asserted itself. Tyler making decisions, assuming control, redirecting her choices to suit his convenience. 6 months ago, Barbara might have acquiesced. Today, standing in the garage where Richard had taught her self-reliance, she felt a surge of resolve. I've already scheduled a meeting with a real estate agent tomorrow, she said calmly. What? Mom, I thought we agreed to discuss this next weekend. We agreed you would visit next weekend. The discussion about the house is happening now. But... Tyler sputtered, clearly caught off guard by her firmness. What's the rush? The housing market might not even be favorable right now. Actually, it's an excellent seller's market in Lexington. And the rush is that I'm 72 years old, Tyler. I don't have unlimited time to start over. A heavy silence followed her words. When Tyler spoke again, his voice was softer. I just don't understand why this is happening so suddenly. First Dad's car, now the house. It's not sudden for me, Barbara explained. I've been thinking about these changes for years. What's sudden is me acting on them. And what about me? What about my connection to home? The question hung between them, layered with unspoken emotions. Barbara chose her words carefully. Your home is in Boston now, Tyler. Has been for over a decade. You have your condo, your career, your life there. This house holds memories for you, but it's not your home anymore. So you're just erasing everything? Selling Dad's car, selling the house, moving to Florida? Not erasing, moving forward. Barbara ran her hand along the smooth surface of the workbench. Richard wanted that for me. He told me so before he died. Another silence, longer this time. Barbara could almost see Tyler processing this information, adjusting his understanding of his parents' relationship. I didn't know that, he finally said. There's a lot you don't know, Tyler, because you haven't been here to see it. The words weren't meant as an accusation, merely a statement of fact, but Barbara heard Tyler's sharp intake of breath. That's not fair. Perhaps not, she conceded, but it's true. The conversation shifted then. Tyler asking practical questions about the real estate agent, the potential listing price, the timeline for the move. Barbara answered patiently, recognizing his retreat into logistics as a way to manage his emotions, a trait he'd inherited from Richard. I should still come up next weekend, he said eventually, to help sort through things, if nothing else. I'd like that, Barbara said, meaning it. Despite everything, she wanted Tyler involved in this transition, wanted to give him the opportunity to connect with his childhood home one last time. After ending the call, Barbara remained in the garage for a while longer, absorbing the space that had been so central to their family life. She noticed a small wooden box on a high shelf, partially hidden behind cans of paint. Curious, she pulled over the step stool and retrieved it. Inside were keepsakes from Tyler's childhood, a collection of Hot Wheels cars, a junior mechanic badge Richard had created for him, photographs of father and son working on the Mustang. Barbara smiled at one, showing a 10-year-old Tyler, face smudged with grease, beaming proudly beside the car's open hood. She would save these for him. Whatever distance existed between them now, these memories were part of their shared history, precious links to the man they had both loved. The doorbell rang again at exactly 3 o'clock. Jack had returned with his brother Antonio and a car trailer. Barbara watched from the kitchen window as they efficiently prepared the Mustang for transport, mounting the tires, lowering it carefully from the jack stands, checking fluid levels and tire pressure. When they started the engine, the familiar rumble filled the neighborhood, a sound that had always announced Richard's return home. Barbara stepped onto the back porch, drawn by the sound. Jack waved her over. "Want to hear it run before we go?" Barbara approached as Jack revved the engine slightly, the well-tuned V8 responding with a healthy growl. "Sounds perfect," she said, raising her voice over the noise. "Richard would be pleased." "We'll take good care of it," Jack promised, patting the roof gently. "Miguel will learn everything about maintaining it properly." As they loaded the Mustang onto the trailer, securing it with straps and wheel chocks, Barbara felt a complex mixture of emotions, sadness at this final separation from Richard's prized possession, but also satisfaction knowing the car would have a new life with a deserving young man. Jack approached her one last time before leaving, holding out his hand. "Thank you for trusting us with this special car." Barbara took his hand in both of hers. "Thank you for being worthy of the trust." She watched as they drove away, the Highland green Mustang gleaming in the afternoon sun. Then she turned back to the house, her house, at least for a little while longer, with a newfound determination. In the kitchen, Barbara opened her laptop and typed out an email to Sharon Mitchell, the real estate agent. "Dear Ms. Mitchell, I'm looking forward to our meeting tomorrow. In preparation, I've been thinking about my requirements for a new home in Naples, Florida." As she wrote, Barbara felt the future taking shape before her, not as a diminishment of her past, but as its natural evolution. Richard would have understood. He had always encouraged her to be brave. On the windowsill above the sink, a potted cutting from her garden caught the late afternoon light. A small shoot from her favorite rosebush, the one Richard had planted for their 25th anniversary. She had prepared it last week, intending to take it with her wherever she went next. New growth from established roots. It seemed an apt metaphor for the journey ahead. 3 months later, Barbara stood in her new kitchen in Naples, arranging a vase of birds of paradise on the granite countertop. Through the sliding glass doors, she could see the community pool glittering in the October sunshine, palm trees swaying gently in the Gulf breeze. The Florida heat was still taking some adjustment, but after the whirlwind of the past months, she welcomed the warmth seeping into her bones. The move had happened with surprising efficiency once she'd committed to it. The Lexington house had sold within a week of listing, significantly above asking price to a young family with twin boys. The father, an English professor at Harvard, a coincidence that had seemed like Richard's final blessing. Barbara had signed the papers for this two-bedroom condo in Pelican Bay, with the same sense of rightness she'd felt when selling the Mustang. Her doorbell chimed, the distinctive three-note melody she was still getting used to. Through the peephole, she saw Catherine and Howard Robertson, her former neighbors who had become her welcoming committee in Naples. "Just checking if you're ready for book club," Catherine said when Barbara opened the door. The petite woman wore a flowing linen dress in a tropical print, her silver hair styled in a chic bob that made Barbara consider updating her own more conservative cut. "Almost," Barbara replied, gesturing them inside. "Just need to grab my notes." Howard settled onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen counter, looking comfortable in the space, though this was only their third visit since Barbara had moved in. "Place is coming together nicely," he observed, eyeing the newly hung artwork. Watercolors Barbara had painted, now properly framed and displayed. "The painters finished the accent wall yesterday," Barbara said, nodding toward the living room, where one wall now sported a soft terracotta color that complemented the neutral tones throughout the condo. "Makes the space feel warmer, don't you think?" Catherine wandered into the living room, admiring the effect. "It's perfect. And your furniture arrived?" The last pieces come tomorrow," Barbara confirmed, gathering her book and reading glasses from the study. She had brought very little furniture from Lexington, choosing instead to furnish the new space with pieces that suited its more contemporary style. The decisions about what to keep and what to let go had been surprisingly liberating. Tyler had come for that final weekend in Lexington as promised, helping sort through decades of accumulated belongings. Their time together had been both painful and healing, moments of tension interspersed with unexpected laughter as they unearthed forgotten treasures and shared memories. "I don't understand how you can just walk away from all this," Tyler had said at one point, gesturing around the attic where they were boxing items for donation. Barbara had considered her response carefully. "I'm not walking away from my life, Tyler. I'm walking toward the next chapter of it." He hadn't fully understood, perhaps couldn't yet, but he had helped nonetheless, respectfully accepting her decisions about what to keep and what to relinquish. And when the moving truck had finally pulled away, he had hugged her more tightly than he had in years. "Ready?" Catherine's voice pulled Barbara back to the present. The three of them walked together through the manicured grounds of Pelican Bay toward the community center where the book club met. Other residents waved or called greetings, many already familiar faces after just 3 weeks. Barbara had worried about being the newcomer in a close-knit community, but the Robertsons had smoothed her way, introducing her to their circle of friends with genuine enthusiasm. "The pickleball crowd is asking when you're going to join them," Howard mentioned as they walked. "I told them you were a tennis player back in Massachusetts." Barbara laughed. 30 years ago, maybe, but I might give it a try." "That's the spirit," Catherine approved. "Marlene was terrified of looking foolish when she started, and now she's organizing tournaments." The book club discussion that afternoon centered on Anne Patchett's latest novel. Barbara had always enjoyed literary analysis, but in her Lexington group she had often deferred to others' interpretations. Today, she found herself offering perspectives that were met with thoughtful consideration, even occasional murmurs of agreement. "That's an interesting take on the protagonist's relationship with her father," said Eleanor, a retired psychology professor. "I hadn't considered the parallel with her career choices." Barbara felt a quiet satisfaction at the validation. This new version of herself, more confident, more willing to assert her opinions, was emerging naturally in this fresh environment. After the meeting, she declined Catherine's invitation to join them for early dinner at the clubhouse. "I have a video call with Tyler at 5, she explained. "Rain check?" Back in her condo, Barbara prepared for the call by setting her laptop on the kitchen counter and pouring herself a glass of Pinot Grigio. These weekly conversations had become a new ritual, established after she'd moved to Florida. To her surprise, Tyler had been the one to suggest them. At precisely 5 o'clock, her laptop chimed with an incoming call. Tyler's face appeared on screen, the familiar backdrop of his condo visible behind him. "Hey, Mom, how's Florida today?" "Sunny and hot," Barbara replied with a smile. "How's Boston?" "First real fall day. Leaves are starting to turn." Tyler held up his mug, broke out the apple cider. They chatted easily about their respective weeks, Barbara's book club and painting class, Tyler's work challenges, and recent squash tournament. There was a new quality to their conversations lately, a genuine interest that had been missing before. Barbara wondered if the physical distance had somehow created space for emotional connection. "Oh, I meant to tell you," Tyler said, his expression brightening. "I got an email from Jack Hernandez last week, the guy who bought Dad's Mustang." Barbara set down her wine glass. "Really? What did he say?" "He sent pictures of his son with the car. Apparently the kid was completely shocked at graduation when they gave it to him." Tyler turned to grab his phone. "Hold on. I'll forward them to you." A moment later, Barbara's phone pinged with an incoming email. She opened it to find several photographs of a handsome young man standing beside the Mustang, his face alight with disbelief and joy. In one image, he was embracing his father, both of them laughing through tears. In another, he sat behind the wheel, hands reverently gripping the steering wheel Richard had held for so many years. "Jack said Miguel has already joined a classic Mustang club," Tyler continued. "They took it to a car show last month and won Best Original Condition in their class." Barbara felt a rush of validation. Richard would have loved that. "Yeah, he would have." Tyler paused, his expression growing more serious. "You know, I was angry about the car for a long time. Felt like you were punishing me." "It wasn't about punishment, Tyler. I know that now." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that Barbara's heart contracted. "The thing is, you were right. I wouldn't have appreciated it the way this kid does. I would have kept it in storage, or maybe driven it occasionally to impress a date. But for Miguel, it's clearly the center of his world right now." The admission surprised her. "That's very self-aware of you." Tyler shrugged, a hint of embarrassment crossing his features. "Been doing some thinking lately, about priorities and stuff." Barbara waited, sensing there was more he wanted to say. "Actually, I've been seeing someone. A therapist, I mean." He looked away from the camera briefly. "Started a couple months ago, right after you moved." "I think that's wonderful, Tyler." "Yeah, well, turns out I have some issues with abandonment, going back to when Dad got sick." His laugh was self-deprecating. "Who knew, right?" Barbara thought of the 16-year-old boy who had retreated into stoic silence as his father's illness progressed, who had thrown himself into school and sports rather than face the reality of Richard's decline. She had tried to reach him then, but he had already begun building the walls that would become his adult pattern. "I'm proud of you for doing that work," she said simply. "Thanks." Tyler took a sip from his mug. "Anyway, there's something else I wanted to tell you. I'm taking some time off work, 3 months, starting in January." 3 months? That's significant. "Yeah, the partners weren't thrilled, but I have the seniority to make it happen." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm going to travel, Southeast Asia, maybe New Zealand. Places I've always said I'd visit someday." Barbara recognized Richard's philosophy in the words. "Someday is a dangerous word," she quoted. "Exactly," Tyler smiled. "Dad used to say that all the time." "He lived by it too," Barbara reminded him. "Remember the year he took a sabbatical and we all went to Europe for the summer? I was thinking about that trip, actually. How he made us spend a whole day in each museum, really looking at everything instead of rushing through. He believed in being present," Barbara said. "Something I'm trying to practice more myself these days." They talked for another half hour. the conversation flowing naturally between past memories and present experiences. As they were about to end the call, Tyler hesitated. "Hey, Mom. I was thinking I might fly down for Thanksgiving, if that's okay. We could have dinner at your place, or go out if you prefer." The invitation, so different from his usual last-minute notifications of his plans, touched her deeply. "I'd love that, Tyler. My place is small, but I think I can manage a proper Thanksgiving dinner." "Great. I'll book flights this week." He paused. "And Mom? I'm glad you're doing this. The Florida thing, you seem, I don't know, more yourself somehow." After they disconnected, Barbara sat with his words, turning them over in her mind. More herself. Yes, that was it exactly. Not a new self, but perhaps her authentic self, emerging from the roles that had defined her for so long. She moved to the sliding doors and stepped out onto her small lanai, where she had created a container garden in miniature. Among the tropical plants thrived the cutting from Richard's anniversary rosebush, now flourishing in its new environment. It had already produced one perfect bloom, its deep red petals unfurling in the Florida sunshine. Barbara's phone rang, an unfamiliar local number. "Hello? Barbara, this is Diane from the Community Arts Committee. We were reviewing the paintings submitted for the winter showcase, and we're very impressed with your watercolors of New England scenes." "Oh, thank you." Barbara had submitted 3 paintings on Catherine's urging, not expecting much to come of it. "We'd like to feature them prominently in the exhibition, and we're wondering if you'd consider teaching a beginner's watercolor class after the new year. Nothing too formal, just 6 weeks for residents who want to try their hand at painting." Barbara found herself agreeing without hesitation, surprising herself with her confidence. When had she become someone who could teach others? After ending the call, she returned to her garden, gently touching the rose that had traveled so far with her. "You wouldn't recognize me, would you, Richard?" she murmured. "Or maybe you would. Maybe you always saw this version of me waiting to emerge." The sun was beginning its descent toward the Gulf, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reflected on the still waters of the community lake. Barbara watched a pair of sandhill cranes picking their way along the shoreline, their movements deliberate and graceful. Inside, her laptop chimed with an email notification. Opening it, she found a message from Sharon Mitchell, her real estate agent from Lexington. "Barbara, hope you're enjoying Florida. Thought you'd like to know the family who bought your house absolutely loves it. They've kept your garden intact and even asked for tips on maintaining the perennials. Attached is a photo they sent me of their boys playing in the backyard. Looks like the right family found the right home. Best, Sharon." The attached photo showed 2 identical boys of about 8, building what appeared to be a fort near the old oak tree where Tyler had once had a treehouse. Their faces were alight with the same imagination and enthusiasm Tyler had brought to that space 3 decades earlier. Barbara smiled, feeling a sense of completion. The house had new life, the Mustang had a new caretaker, and she had a new beginning. As twilight deepened, Barbara picked up her sketchbook and began to draw the view from her lanai. The palms silhouetted against the sunset sky, the birds wading at the lake's edge, the neighbors walking their dogs along the path. This was her world now, these moments, her present. The rose from Lexington caught the last golden light of day, its petals glowing with borrowed fire. Barbara added it to her sketch, this bridge between past and present, a reminder that growth often required both roots and wings. Tomorrow she would attend her first meeting of the Arts Committee, then join Catherine and Howard for lunch at a beachside restaurant they'd recommended. The day after, she had scheduled a tour of the Naples Botanical Garden, seeking inspiration for both her container garden and her paintings. Life continued to unfold, one day flowing into the next, each bringing its own small discoveries and connections. The past remained with her, in memories, in the occasional pang of nostalgia, in weekly calls with Tyler, but it no longer defined her horizons. Barbara closed her sketchbook as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Inside, she turned on lamps against the gathering dusk and put on music. Not Richard's preferred classical selections, but a jazz playlist she'd discovered recently and found she enjoyed. On the counter lay the book for next month's discussion group, a novel she'd been meaning to read for years but had never found time for. Beside it was a brochure for an Everglades tour that several residents had invited her to join. And propped against the wall was her newest watercolor, still unfinished. A scene from memory, the Mustang parked in the driveway of the Lexington house, waiting for a journey to begin. Barbara studied the painting critically. She'd captured the car's lines well, the distinctive profile that had been so familiar for 40 years, but something was missing. After a moment's consideration, she picked up her brush and added a figure beside the car. Not Richard or Tyler, but herself, hand resting on the green hood, face turned toward the viewer with an expression of quiet determination. It was, she realized, a self-portrait of the woman she had always been beneath the roles of wife and mother, the woman who had stood in the rain at South Station and decided, finally, to put herself first. The woman who had found the courage to sell the car, sell the house, and drive toward an uncertain but promising horizon. The woman who had, at last, taken the wheel of her own life. Setting down her brush, Barbara Taylor smiled at the image she had created, past and present, reconciled in pigment and water, memory and possibility flowing together like the tide that now marked her days, instead of snow and seasons. Outside, the Florida night deepened, stars emerging in constellations both familiar and new. Barbara closed her paint box, content with the knowledge that tomorrow would bring another blank page, another chance to add color to this unexpected chapter of her story. And she was ready.